Homelessness, illegal immigration, the high cost of living, and fires. As if one of our biggest states isn't suffering enough, California residents have now been told they face forced blackouts that could come and go for years. That disaster traces directly to the power company Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E. We sent Lisa Fletcher to the Golden State to find out what's behind the disasters and darkness.
Oh my God.
In California, it was a season defined by infernos. And then, from the frightening light of fires to an eerily enforced darkness. Like in this Santa Rosa neighborhood, blacked out except for the headlights of cars. It's an intentional power outage triggered by power company Pacific Gas and Electric, known as PG&E. Just up the road, in a community resource center set up by PG&E, Ken Corgis is sitting in a warmed tent, charging his phone from a strip powered by a generator.
It's pretty scary, it's very boring, nothing to do. It is frustrating, but I know that, it's for our own good.
Because the alternative could be worse. To explain, we travel 180 miles northeast to the rubble of Paradise, California, the site of the state's deadliest and most destructive wildfire. It was November of 2018. Flames blew through Paradise in less than 24 hours, torching more than 31 square miles. It became known as the Camp Fire, killing 85 people and destroying nearly 19,000 homes. According to the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, the fire was caused by electrical transmission lines owned and operated by PG&E. PG&E supplies electricity and natural gas to 16 million people. Its system was built beginning over a century ago to carry water-powered electricity from the Sierra Nevada mountains in eastern California to the San Francisco Bay Area. But its infrastructure is aging. It is still using some towers and equipment from the early 1900s. According to a 700-page investigation by the state, PG&E failed to inspect and maintain an aging electrical tower, citing issues with several parts of the tower that went unnoticed. The investigation found that if PG&E had identified one worn piece of equipment and replaced it, the campfire could have been prevented. It wasn't an isolated case. PG&E equipment reportedly sparked 19 major blazes in 2017 and 2018. PG&E faced $30 billion in liability for those fires, plunging the utility into bankruptcy last year. After the fire that destroyed Paradise, PG&E began taking drastic new measures, watching for risky weather conditions, humidity, wind speed, and dry conditions on the ground. Rather than risk sparking, they cut power. The first blackout in October impacted 2 million people. Santa Rosa suffered through 6 scheduled blackouts last fall.
I've lived here 40 years. And now
Santa Rosa's mayor, Tom Schwedhelm.
When do we get back to normal? Because I'm not comfortable saying this is the new normal. There's got to be a better way. We just haven't figured it out yet.
The night we met him, the city was in the middle of a blackout. He was working late in his office, surveying outage maps and talking on the phone, but mainly listening.
The gentleman I just talked to who's, he's a senior citizen. He can't keep going through that. His wife's got dementia.
As a mayor of a community of nearly 200,000, it must be extremely frustrating.
Even some of the individuals I talk with today, it's like I'm getting tired of throwing all the food out of my freezer.
PG&E's CEO Bill Johnson defended the choice to cut power in an emergency hearing called by California's Public Utilities Commission in October.
I have heard and read a lot of skepticism about our actions. I hear skepticism about whether the shutoff was truly necessary. Skepticism that we did this to save our own skin rather than for public safety. The fact is that we did this for one reason, and that is safety.
Johnson says for safety, the blackouts will continue for up to 10 years, though they may become less frequent.
People's lives depend upon electricity. It's not something that Californians can kind of gloss over lightly.
Bill Whalen is an analyst at the Hoover Institution, a California think tank. He says one solution may be the most obvious: bury the power lines that run through dry, high-risk areas.
You have to convert from overhead because clearly every time it gets windy and you have overhead wires, you run the risk of a fire.
PG&E has committed to burying the power lines in Paradise and the other areas that were burned by the Camp Fire in 2018. PG&E wouldn't agree to an on-camera interview, but told us burying power lines is not a solution that can further reduce the risk of wildfire in the near term, because they can still be impacted by things like floods, earthquakes, and equipment issues. And it's too expensive. From a cost perspective, burying all 81,000 miles of its power lines at $3 million per mile would reportedly cost quadrillions.
Every time you press PG&E on this, they cry foul. They claim they don't have enough money, but yet they somehow have money to lobby the state, and they spend ambitiously on lobbying.
We asked PG&E how much it spent on lobbying the past decade. The utility would only say it files all appropriate disclosures. According to the watchdog Open Secrets, PG&E spent more than $10 million on lobbying last year alone. PG&E adds that's paid by shareholders, not customers, and it holds itself to high standards of public disclosure and compliance with the law. According to published reports, PG&E paid its top 5 executives roughly $17 million in bonuses from 2012 to 2017. That includes a pay boost in 2015, the same year a fire caused by PG&E equipment killed 2 people. In August, a bankruptcy judge denied the company's new plans to pay at least $11 million in executive bonuses. Also last fall, hours before the first blackout, PG&E treated its top customers to a wine tasting weekend in Sonoma. The utility apologized for insensitivity. Back in Santa Rosa, the cost of the outages are adding up for restaurant owner Lorena Anaya and her husband.
Any sense of what the outages have cost you in total?
I think it's around $16,000 to $18,000.
What does that $16,000 to $18,000 mean, you guys?
It hurts. It hurts really, and not only for us, but for our employees. For us, they're our family, and it hurts us that they don't even get a pay either. So it's really hard.
To keep the power flowing, they had to buy a generator for $1,200.
I hope PG&E figures out, because we can't, they say this is going to continue for 10 years. My business will not be here in 10 years if they keep doing this. And I've been here 24 years.
It's a part of you.
Yeah. So it hurts.
The fire season in California is starting earlier and ending later each year. In 2019, there were more than 7,000 fires, destroying almost 400 square miles and killing 3 people. In the Golden State, it's going to be a long battle to keep the lights up and the risk of disaster down.
So is there any way to tell whether the blackouts are serving their purpose?
Well, PG&E says they're working. This month, CEO Bill Johnson wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying PG&E had no deadly wildfires in 2019 and had a 25% reduction in sparks associated with PG&E equipment in high-risk areas, though it's hard to prove a negative and know exactly which area could have produced a spark.
And so what happens next?
Well, there's a deadline to all of this. PG&E needs to resolve its bankruptcy by June 30th, and if they don't, the governor says the state's going to step in and take over the utility. And there has been some talk about turning it into a customer-owned co-op.
Okay, and what about the fire victims who have sued for liability?
This is interesting. PG&E has proposed settling with them for $13.5 billion, but that still has to be approved by a judge. And within the last week, FEMA got involved in this. FEMA says PG&E owes it $4 billion in reimbursement for the federal response to fires. And now FEMA says if it doesn't get that money from the utility, it's prepared to actually bill fire victims for the money. So there's a lot at stake here. We're going to keep you updated as it all plays out.
Okay, thanks so much, Lisa.